GDP, indicator limitations. Gross domestic product, commonly referred to as GDP, is one of the most widely used economic indicators. It is used to measure the economic output of a country and is considered a key indicator of a country's economic health. In this essay, we will explore what GDP is, how it is calculated, and its limitations as an economic indicator. GDP is the total value of all goods and services produced within a country's borders over a specific period, usually a year. This includes goods produced by domestic firms, as well as goods produced by foreign firms within the country's borders. GDP is used to measure the size of a country's economy and its growth rate. To calculate GDP, economists use one of three methods: the production approach, the income approach, or the expenditure approach. The production approach measures GDP by adding up the value of all goods and services produced in a country. The income approach measures GDP by adding up all the income earned by households and firms in a country. The expenditure approach measures GDP by adding up all the spending on goods and services in a country. Despite its widespread use, GDP has some limitations as an economic indicator. One of the most significant limitations is that GDP does not take into account the distribution of wealth within a country. It is possible for a country's GDP to be high, but for the majority of its citizens to be poor. This can occur when a small percentage of the population controls a large percentage of the country's wealth. Another limitation of GDP is that it does not take into account the value of non-market activities. For example, GDP does not include the value of household work, such as cooking and cleaning, that is not paid for in the market. This can result in an underestimation of the value of a country's economic output. GDP also does not take into account the environmental impact of economic activity. GDP can increase as a result of activities that harm the environment, such as pollution and deforestation. This can lead to a situation where a country's GDP increases, but its natural resources are depleted, and the environment is damaged. Finally, GDP does not take into account the value of leisure time. An increase in GDP can be accompanied by an increase in the number of hours worked, which can result in less leisure time for individuals. This can lead to a situation where a country's GDP increases, but the quality of life of its citizens decreases. In conclusion, GDP is an important economic indicator that is used to measure a country's economic output and growth rate. However, it has some limitations, including its inability to take into account the distribution of wealth within a country, the value of non-market activities, the environmental impact of economic activity, and the value of leisure time. Despite these limitations, GDP remains a useful tool for policymakers and economists in understanding and analyzing the performance of an economy.